However much you seem to be living in a material, solid reality right now, you are actually living in a simulation. It's actually not real. And you don't need to fear, you don't need to stress, you don't need to worry anymore. If you have control of the direction of your attention, and you have present moment awareness, and you have experiences with the glitches, and understand that you're living in a simulation, all of that kind of fades away, and you can turn your control into manipulating and changing your reality as you see fit. And this is where the hacks come in. This is where you start seeing the glitches. This is where you start learning how to control the simulation. And this is why we're covering these chapters. And today we're getting back into The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. This is chapter 13, Acceptance. And as always, this video and all the videos on the channel now are sponsored by our school community with over 1,000 members and 93% success. All right, over 1,000 members and over 93% success, where 93% are seeing results in their life. Remember, if you spend a lot of time in self-development and you have a good community with like-minded individuals that are all on the same path as you, the likelihood of your success and your growth is that much more in favor and going to happen to you more quickly. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into this. Chapter 13, man's perceptions are not bounded by organs of perception. He perceives more than the sense though ever so acute, can discover. William Blake. So however much you seem to be living in a material world, you are actually living in a world of imagination or an illusion, a simulation, a simulator. All right, so the outer physical events of your life are the fruit of forgotten blossom times. Everything that you're experiencing in your world is everything you consent to being true. Every imagined act that you've had, any assumption that you've had in the past where you consented to that being true, that's why your world is as it is. But you have the privilege of changing that now. You have the privilege of changing all that stuff now. But if you don't change it, it's all going to stay the same. Your life's not going to change unless you change the internal world. In order to see a radical physical change within the simulation, you must first have a radical psychological change within yourself. So remember that. It's all going to stay the same unless you start changing the internal world. All right, so the outer physical events of life are the fruit of forgotten blossom times, results of previous and usually forgotten states of consciousness. All these things you've probably forgotten, and that's why we wonder, why is this happening to me? Why is my world this way? You have created it somewhere along the lines where you were unconscious and imagined it to happen, believed it to be true of your world. All right, so they are the ends running true to often forgotten imaginative origins. Whenever you become completely absorbed in an emotional state, you are at that moment assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Remember that. Listen to this. Listen to this right here. Whenever you become completely absorbed in an emotional state, whether that's positive or negative, you are at that moment recreating more of that to come to you in your world through your imaginary acts, your imaginal acts. Remember that whenever you become completely absorbed and your attention and focus is on something, you are creating more than that, more of that same thing to happen. So if you're not present and you're not aware of what you're focusing on, what you're reacting to, what you're becoming absorbed in emotionally, then you're never going to know what you're creating. And so you can't blame your world for that. You can only blame yourself. You have to develop your focus, present moment awareness, and know what's happening in the internal world, because that's what's being pushed out. We've already established this stuff. All right, so remember this. So you are at the moment assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If persisted in whatsoever you are intensely emotional about, you will experience in your world. So remember this, just like what I said. If you persist, and this can even happen after doing it one time, but if you persist in that emotional negative state, you are going to experience more of that in your world. But you can also flip that. You can do that for abundant things, successful things, great relationships, great health, having a great physique, living in the house of your dreams, having the relationship of your dreams, following your purpose, your passion, finding your true self, your highest self. If you persist emotionally and accept it as true, now that you are that person and you become emotionally controlled by that. All right, remember this. All of this is true. I've experienced all of this to work. All right, my life. A lot of people in the comments are saying that I inherited millions from my grandfather. I didn't inherit any material things from my grandfather. All of that went to my mother. She has all of it. She didn't give me anything either. I don't want her to give me anything. I don't want anyone to give me anything. I don't need anyone to give me anything. All right. I can create my reality. I'm not putting off that version of myself where I feel like I need things for free. I don't need anything from anyone. I can create whatever I want. And I want to create that through a purpose, through servitude. And that's why I'm teaching all of this. This is why I created my brand. This is why I created any one of my companies, is because I'm providing a service and then I want to get paid for that. Yes. But that's just a side effect of providing the service itself. And I'm reading the comments and I'm like, I didn't inherit any money. I built everything I have by myself. The only thing I inherited was knowledge. I inherited what my grandfather told me, which was better than any material thing that you could ever think of. Because if you have fish or you have food and someone's asking you for that food, why don't you teach them how to get their own food? That's a better gift than giving them food. Like in the Bible, someone asks you for fish, you teach them how to fish. You don't give them any fish. You teach them, this is how you fish. I'm going to show you how you fish. So you're not going to need to ask anyone for anything anymore. You're going to learn how to manifest and create yourself. And you're not going to have to ask people for anything because you're going to know how to get things by providing that and feeling good about yourself. It's all about how you feel, truly acceptance of yourself and becoming the version of yourself you love, respect, and admire, and giving that person the world. It's not about you, it's about them. And when you get that in your mind, you don't need you don't need people to give you things. You don't want to be that concept of self. You want to become the version of yourself that has a purpose, that has a vision for themselves, and create whatever they want. All right, so I kind of went on a rant there, but I wanted to address that because I think that's so important for each and every one of us to understand. All right, so, but remember, anything you become emotionally charged about, whether that's negative or positive, and especially if you persist in that, you will create that into your reality, okay? So if it is something negative, turn it into something positive and then become emotionally charged about that. Okay, just like I did right there. It's a perfect example. I see negative comments where people are saying, oh, I inherited all my money from my grandfather. All right, what did I do? I turned that into a positive. That way I could teach you something through my experiences that you shouldn't want to be given anything. You should want to create a service, create a version of yourself where you can create anything you want, and you're teaching that to other people. I turned that completely into a positive so I can teach something and help more people with that negativity. I turned that into a positive. Now I'm persistent in that, and then I'm going to create more and more and more from that. So it's a perfect example, because when you're in a high frequency, even if something low frequency comes to your life, you're not going to accept it as low frequency. It's going to be high frequency because you're going to turn it into something that's going to be for your benefit, where you can help somebody else. You can completely turn a 180 with that, and then help other people or grow yourself with that knowledge, whatever it is, whatever negativity it is. I don't see negativity. It always turns to positive because I'm in a high frequency. Remember that. And you know that you're in a high frequency when you start experiencing that, when you start catching yourself doing that. Like if somebody is negative in your life and all of a sudden you start seeing the positive in that person, that's when you know you're in your feeling of your wish fulfilled and your manifestations are definitely coming to you. All right, so these periods of absorption of concentrated attention are the beginnings of the things you harvest. It is in such moments that you are exercising your creative power, the only creative power there is. That's the only creative power there is your imagination. And so how well can you control that? That's the question. How well can you visualize? How well can you imagine something that's working out for your benefit? How well can you see your inner dialogue in the pictures that are coming up into your mind unconsciously? Are you conscious of that? Do you know what's happening? Do you know what's creating your world? Do you know why your world is the way that it is? Develop your mind. Develop the internal world, and you will be able to see this and change it and change it. All right. So at the end of these periods, okay, so this is important. That's the only creative power that is. But at the end of these periods or moments of absorption, you speed from these imaginative states where you have not been physically to where you were physically in an instant ago. In these periods, the imagined state is sober. This is how creation works, through your imagination. All right. So when you're emotionally attached to something in your world, whether it's positive or negative, you go into the future and make it now. So you're creating in that moment through your imagination an event that's going to happen to you. So these are moments of absorption. So you speed from these imaginative states that you're having, where you have not been physically, but you will be there if you persist in them, to where you were physically an instant ago. So in these periods, the imagined state is so real that when you return to the objective world and find that it is not the same as the imagined state, it is actually a shock. So what he's talking about here is shocking the positron as well. Like when you can use your visualization skills so well that you can go into the future, like go into January of next year, create an imaginal act so real. And while you're in that imaginal act in January, you're looking back on yourself in November and be like, oh, I remember when I imagined this. But you're actually still in November. But you've made that scene so real in January, and you're actually there, but it's actually now to you. You've made that moment now in January that you're looking back on yourself as if you're in January, looking back in October or November and remembering, oh, I remember when I imagined this. That's when you come back. That's what he's talking about here. So when you return to the objective world, you find that it's not the same as the imagined state. It's actually a shock to you. So when you come back, it's shocked. So that's shocking time sense, or activating the positron. That's when you can get that good. That means that you're shocking time sense to where you will inevitably be led to that incident or that vision that you had, because you made it so real. It's automatically impressed into the subconscious mind and shifts your reality to that happening. All right, so that's like the highest. Those are like the highest levels. You don't have to learn. You don't have to be that good with your imagination in order to change your life. So remember that. These are just other things that Neville Goddard went through. And I had so much time in prison that I messed around with this kind of stuff. But it can be done, and I have done this before. But you don't need to focus on being that good at your visualizations and creating it with your imagination. All you have to do is all these other elements that we're talking about, is getting the facility of your attention, your present moment awareness, and knowing the things that you are reacting to and you are becoming emotionally charged about, and knowing that you're living in a simulation, and start changing these things, changing who you are. Okay, changing the mind, having a radical psychological change will have a radical psychological or physical change within your reality. So remember that. So you have seen something in imagination with such vividness that you are now wonder whether the evidence of your senses can now be believed. And like Keats, you ask, was it a waking dream? Was it a vision, or was it a waking dream? Fled is that music, do I wake or do I sleep? All right, so this shock reverses your time sense. By this is meant that instead of you experiencing the result from your past, it now becomes the result of being in imagination where you have not been yet physically. In effect, this moves you across the bridge of incidents to the physical realization of your imagined state. The man or woman who at will can assume whatever state he or she pleases has found the keys to the kingdom of heaven. This is the symbolic nature of the Bible. When you can do this, when you can assume whatever state you please at any time, and you have control of the direction of your attention and imagination and present moment awareness, knowing you're living in a simulation, you have the keys to the kingdom of heaven. So the keys are desire, imagination, and there we go, a steadily focused attention. I always have to point this out because this is what I teach on the school community. The keys are desire, imagination, and a steadily focused attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. To such a man or woman, any undesirable objective fact is no longer a reality, and the ardent wish no longer a dream. So once you develop these facilities, you no longer look at the world like, oh, I'm never going to have that. Or I can't. You see someone that has, a supercar, or living in a huge mansion, or has a huge business. They're 8-figure coach or something. You're like, oh, I can never do that. You'll never think that way anymore. Once you get control of the facility of your mind, you're now going to be like, I can have that too. I know how to get that, and I'm going to get that. So that you step outside of the old version of yourself. Now anything is possible to you. It's no longer a dream to you. Now it can be a reality, and you'll know that. All right, so prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be enough room to receive it. Malachi 3:10 from the Bible. So the windows of heaven may not be opened and the treasures seized by a strong will, but they open of themselves and present their treasures as a gift that comes when absorption reaches such a degree that it results in a feeling of complete acceptance. This is the natural feeling. This is why I talk about visualization. The more you visualize something, the more you feel natural in that state. The more normal it feels for you. And if you start visualizing yourself living in your dream house, and you're visualizing that 10 times a day, falling asleep with that, You're going to start feeling really natural in that state, normal in living in that house. And then something's going to happen to where it's going to come to you. Remember, as soon as you feel natural having what you want to have, you will have it. And you're going to accept it. The acceptance, the complete acceptance, the normal feeling of that, okay? And the more you imagine it, the more natural it feels. All right. So the passage from your present state to the feeling of the wish fulfilled is not across a gap, but there is continuity between the so-called real and unreal. To cross from one state to the other, you simply extend your feelers, trust your touch, and fully enter into the spirit of what you are doing, thinking from the event. Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Zechariah 4:6. Not by might nor by spirit. Effortless. You go by spirit. You extend your feelers. You don't cross. Okay, you don't do this. All right, you don't go across a gap. There is no gap or separation within consciousness, okay? There is continuity between the real and unreal. To cross from one state to the other, you simply extend your feelers and feel it to be true now. The secret. Okay, so here. Assume the spirit and the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you will have opened the windows to receive the blessing. To assume a state is to get into the spirit of it. Your triumphs will be a surprise only to those who did not know your hidden message. From the state of longing to the assumption of the wish fulfilled. The Lord of hosts will not respond to your wish until you have assumed the feeling of already being what you want to be. For acceptance is the channel of his action. Acceptance is the Lord of hosts in action. All right, that's a really good chapter. But remember, there's another thing that came up. And because we really don't have an information issue. We have an application issue. And a lot of times I have found before that when you invest in yourself, especially like in a community or with coaching that you actually have to pay for, the likelihood of you actually doing the work increases so drastically. And I've had that before where I'm giving out free content, coaching for free, and the percentage of the results were so low. But as soon as I started charging for those things and started making like a small fee, people investing and knowing they have money in that investment, the likelihood of them actually doing what I'm telling them to do increases significantly. So remember that. If you are watching these videos, and you have all the information, but you find that you can't find a proper routine and you can't stick with it, you can't change your life, and you haven't seen results, consider joining a community where you can invest in yourself, where you have this stuff laid out, these routines laid out for you, where you're going to be like, you want to know what? I'm going to commit to changing my life. I'm going to commit to doing these exercises. I'm going to commit to having a radical psychological change within myself because I committed to this community. So remember that from my actual real results that I've seen so much of. And if you're one of those people, consider joining something where you can get a routine in place and invest in yourself and really change your life. All right, guys, that is the end of this. We're going to get into chapter 14 next. And I love you all, and I will see you inside the school community. Love you.